Working in open source, whether you're contributing to it or whether you're running a project, can be daunting. In this video, we're going to go over some tips to make the process easier and less frustrating for both sides. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. I do that by providing videos here on YouTube multiple times per week. Plus, I have a weekly podcast. I also provide courses on C#, web development, and much more on IamTimCorey.com. The profits from those sales are what pays for the free content here on YouTube so that everyone can have a great education in C#, not just those who can afford it. All right, so let's jump right into what we're going to do today, which is do a little bit of work in open source. So I'm going to use as kind of as a stand-in this project right here, which I created this project just as a way to get my stuff to work. Okay, I do a lot of recording, and what I do with my recordings is I'll zip up a Visual Studio solution and all the projects inside it to give to you. But those can be very large with all the executables and DLLs that get compiled. So I have this routine that strips out the OBJ folder and the bin folder. That makes them much, much smaller, and it's more easy to pass around because your antivirus doesn't say, hey, there's an executable file in here, when there should be, but it's not always seen as correct or seen as non-virus related. So this is just a cleanup that I do on all of my zip files. So I created this little application, and I put this in open source just to show off how you would do something like this and what you'd set up. For example, I have here my clear statement of what this thing does. The application zips up Visual Studio projects and solutions without unnecessary files and folders like the bin and OBJ directories. That's what it does. That's all it does. Installation instructions, the current features that are in it, the roadmap for what's coming, and possible ideas as well. So this is my application as it stands right now, which is very much pre-alpha. I haven't done much work on it, but just got something out there to get something started. Now, from the owner's side, the first thing you need to know, if you create a project like this on GitHub or somewhere else where it's public, is you need to have a very clear understanding of the purpose and direction of your application. It's important that you know where the application wants to go or where you want it to go, because when you put things on the internet, everyone has an opinion. And if you're not careful, you can be driven by multiple different opinions that all sound good in the moment, but what happens is it drives your application to a place you never expected or wanted it to go. So be careful to have a clear purpose and direction for your application, and then also stick to a clear roadmap. So my roadmap, it's not very detailed at this point, but these are the only things that we're going to work on so far, is this roadmap right here. Okay? And then this gets a little harder, but this tip is be ready to reject help. This is hard because people genuinely want to help you sometimes, and sometimes you have to say, I appreciate it, but that's not the direction the application is going. And if you don't know, that can be even more difficult, which is the first tip. Know the purpose and direction of your application is so important. Because if you don't know where you're going and someone offers help, it's hard to say no because you don't have a reason. Like, what's the reason? Why are you not accepting the help? And if you do accept help, then you're not really leading the project, and so it might go in the wrong direction. All right? And so I'm going to show off a couple of things in here. Before I do want to point out that I have rejected some suggestions in here. However, that does not mean the suggestions were bad. Okay? I'll be very clear on this because it's very important that you understand the difference between rejecting an application or a suggestion because it's bad and rejecting one because it does not align with the goals of your project. They're different. And so let's just be clear here. I'm going to use an example, but does not mean the suggestion is bad. So please don't think the person did a bad thing. If you're that person, don't feel like this is an attack against you. It's not. It was a helpful suggestion, but it's not in line with my my goals, okay? So let's go to the issues and let's just look at what might come through. So we have here 4 closed suggestions. And we're just going to pull one of these, and that is to this one right here, suggestion use a class library. Okay, so the suggestion here is, hey, let's create this into a class library, maybe use a NuGet package, and they can bundle this up and have it be a tool that isn't directly, could be brought into Visual Studio and things like that. And that's not the direction of this application. The application direction is a standalone executable application, which doesn't fit in this vision. Now, this vision can be valid for some applications or even a fork of this application. Maybe someone says, yeah, but I think that's the way to go. Fork the project, which means make a copy of it, and then do your own thing with it. Okay, so it's designed to be run on its own apart from Visual Studio. So making a NuGet package here wouldn't be helpful. All right, so just want to make clear, you're going to get suggestions, and you want to make sure that you're not negative towards that because they are trying to help, but at the same time, you have to have that clear direction. Like I said, if I didn't have a clear direction of where this app was going to go, I might create a NuGet package for this and bundle it up as a class library, but then it wouldn't do what I wanted it to do in the first place. All of a sudden now I have a whole bunch of code in a huge application, if it was huge, but a whole application written that doesn't accomplish the original goal. And remember, the original goal was to zip up Visual Studio projects and solutions without the unnecessary files and folders. So be prepared to reject help. Okay, so from the owner side, we've got know the purpose and direction of your application, stick to a clear roadmap, be ready to reject help, and finally, this one can be very difficult, but maintain your boundaries. This is a personal one. What that means is this project right here should not rule my life. This project is a tiny side thing that I kind of just threw together to get me through doing a lot of work. It was not something that is the primary thing I'm doing. So if tomorrow I have 50 new open issues, I shouldn't freak out. I shouldn't feel obligated to respond to all 50 in the next day. In fact, it may take me months to respond to 50 issues. That's okay. You have to maintain those boundaries because otherwise what happens is the project starts ruling you. Now, that may mean that well-intentioned people who were genuinely trying to help and who had helpful things to provide may move on. And they may not continue to help because of the fact that they had time now, you didn't. And you have to be okay with that because of the fact that this can't rule your life. It's not uncommon for open source developers to at some point walk away. And the reason they walk away is because of the fact it starts to rule their life. And that's a shame. It shouldn't happen. Okay? So be careful of that on the owner side. Be careful to maintain your boundaries. This is true also for pull requests. You may get 50 new pull requests. We're going to talk more about pull requests in a little bit, but you may get 50. And that's a lot of work people have done to help you out. Do not feel like you have to integrate those in right away. Don't feel like you have to have them reviewed right away. Take your time. Set out those boundaries. Maybe you say, you know what? I'm only going to dedicate 5 hours a week to this project, or maybe 5 hours a month to this project. You might even say that right up front. Hey, you know what? I'm dedicating 5 hours a month to this project. That's it. And if you have people come on to help, great. But make sure that they are still working through the roadmap. Make sure you've vetted them to make sure they're going to put things or push things in the right direction. But maintain those boundaries for your sake. Okay? So that's from the owner side. Now, some tips from the contributor side. Let's say you want to contribute to this project or another one like it. First of all, learn about the project first. Now, if you read this one line right here and go, ooh, I've got great ideas, take a pause, stop, look at the rest of the information first. Look at what it currently does, look what the roadmap is, look at possible ideas for the future. Okay? Understand those first. Look at the code and see what it does before you start making contributions or suggestions. Otherwise, you may make suggestions that aren't in line with what the project's goals are, which means you're really taking time away from the project instead of adding to it. Because if your contributions are mainly about things that aren't going to happen, and you had this whole conversation about it to come to that conclusion, that wasn't really helpful for the project. Now, you can't always know, but do your best to understand the project first. Next up, when you decide, hey, I want to do some work on this project, ask first. Don't just do the work. Otherwise, you may find that somebody else was doing the work too. Or you may find that it's not time for the work. For instance, down here, make this a Visual Studio extension. That's a great feature I would love to have at some point. It is not the feature for right now. So if you make this an extension right now, I can't really use that yet. So therefore, I'm going to at least put your pull request on hold, if not reject it, even though it's something I want, because it's not something I need right now. So be careful to ask first to make sure that you and the project owner are in alignment on what should be done when. Next up, be aware that your ideas might not align with the project direction. So it's the other side of it. So if the owner says, nope, I don't want that, well, it's their project. They get to do that. So even if you think it's the best idea ever, leave it alone. Okay? Don't just argue and push back and push back and push back. It's okay to say, hey, I've got a suggestion. Have you thought about? But don't harass the author to do something that's not in line with their vision for the project. And kind of a sub point or a point with that, though, is don't take it personal. This is not about you. This is about trying to make sure that the owner's vision of this project is the vision is realized, comes to fruition. Because if you have a great idea, but it's not in line with that, it actually takes resources away from the project. All right? So don't take it personal. So even if an idea is great, and even if you create this whole big pull request, it might get rejected. And the reason why is because, let's just say for this project, you had this really cool user interface that does great things. Maybe you spent, 100 hours making this beautiful thing. And it's got 10,000 lines of code to make this thing really sing when it comes to the UI of it. And you submit that pull request. I will reject it. And there's two reasons for it. One is it's not on the roadmap. That's not what I asked for. But number two, if I were to look at that and go, man, this is great, and integrate it, now I, as the project owner, am responsible for maintaining it. So if you add 10,000 lines of code to my project, I have to maintain 10,000 more lines of code. If it's not in line with what I wanted the project to do, then it's 10,000 lines I have to maintain that are just dragging me down. So be careful to be in line with the project and talk first, because of the fact that the owner has to maintain it. The owner has to take on this work. It's no different than if someone gave you a house, which sounds great, but now you're responsible for the taxes. Now you're responsible for making sure all of the house is weatherproofed. Now you're responsible if the roof blows off. Now you're responsible for mowing the lawn. There's a lot of responsibilities that come with that gift. That's not to say it's not a great gift, but there is a lot of responsibilities. And if you can't maintain the responsibilities, then that gift is actually not valuable. Okay, so just be aware of that and don't take it personal. Now, here's one that, and I promise we're gonna get to some code in a bit, but here's one that's important. They're all important, but here's one that's often overlooked. Right now, I have an editor config. This editor config lines up the things that's the style for this project. It doesn't cover everything. Actually, it's very little stuff. I have to put more in it, but I have settings for this project. You may not agree with those settings. You may want something different. The way I name variables. If we go in here to the library and look at the CS file, I name variables like exclusions. I call it zipper. I have certain things that I do. Maybe you don't agree with those. Maybe you do things differently. Do not change from the structure of the project. Meaning, let's just say that you like to have Hungarian notation. So in front of a folder would be str, and in front of a zip file would be str as well. Don't do that. Even the new stuff. Even if you contribute something new, conform to the way that the owner has set the project. Don't try to change it, because you're just making a mess at that point. You're making it more difficult to maintain the project. Don't fix their formatting. If they have formatting a certain way, conform to that, even if you don't like it. Because it's not about you, it's about contributing to the project. So be careful of that. Make sure that you're in line with their standards. This is true for work too. If you go into a job and say, hey, I think we should do everything differently, that's not a good thing. You need to start by conforming to the standards. You can work to lobby to change those. You can make suggestions, but it's not your place to go through and change everything. Otherwise, you make a mess, you make things worse, not better. That also means when you commit, be very careful that you're not running code cleanup that would change minor things but all over. So for example, if you change from 4 spaces to 3 per tab group, well, that would mean you check in basically every file in the project if you did a code cleanup everywhere. That wouldn't be good. It creates a mess in the repository, creates a mess in the history to track what was changed and how. Just don't do it. All right. If you decide, hey, there's a problem, I want to submit a new issue, make sure that you leave good details. An issue of, it doesn't work. Let's add some more exclamation points there. There we go. It doesn't work. That is a horrible issue. I would delete it immediately or close it out and say no. Make sure you include details. What happened exactly, what the error was, not generally, not there was an error, not the error said something like. Have exact wording. If you can, screenshots too. Okay? Be very clear about what happened, how you can reproduce it, what you tried, and if it works in a clean project. Meaning, if you start over and try it again, does it still have the same problem, or is it just in your particular case? The more detail you can provide, the better. Again, are you trying to help the project or hurt the project? This issue right here hurts the project. It just takes time away. If you have a clear, reproducible error log that shows exactly what happened and why, and hopefully even some thoughts on what might be causing the problem, that is helpful. Even better, if you can say, this is the problem I have found the solution for this, and here's the code for it. Can I submit a pull request to solve this? Perfect, beautiful. That's how you contribute to open source. All right, so be careful of that. When you submit issues, give lots of detail, put in the work. Don't just expect everyone else to do the work because they own it. And finally, this is very, very important. Remember that open source contributors do not work for you. The fact that this code is here on GitHub does not mean that I owe you support, or that I owe you a fix of your bug, or that I owe you anything. In fact, it's the opposite. You owe them. So act like it. When you're working with open source projects, be kind, be courteous. Remember that they are giving you something for free. Act like it. Act like it's a gift, not like it's a right. Okay? So with that, we're going to look at, in here, I have one pull request that Pierre Ed was actually great. The use app settings.json to avoid hard coding exclusions into zipper class. If you notice, right down here on my roadmap is that I wanted to have a dynamic set of exclusions instead of hard coding them. So he looked at the roadmap, went, "Ooh, I can do that," and did it. So we're going to work on this pull request. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to grab this repository. So I'm going to go code, HTTPS, copy that link. And then what we'll do is I'm going to open up my temp directory here. We're going to bring the project down for the first time because it's easy to bring down a project again. Okay, so I can do it again and again in different spots just to have a fresh copy. But if I was working in this project, I'll show you how to just start from there. So either way, I'll go to Open Terminal Windows, Terminal. I'm going to say git clone and that URL. So now I've brought that whole repository down. Notice VS Zipper is here. If we open that up, there's the entire project. And let's go one level deeper into VS Zipper. You'll notice two files here, program.cs and vszipper.proj. All right, I'm going to shrink it out a little bit and move this terminal up here so you can see both. Let's change the directory into vszipper. Clear the screen, and we're going to say get status. Always a good thing to start with. So in here, we see that the branch is on main, and we're up to date with origin/main. That also tells us what the remote server is. It's called origin. Now, if you needed to check out what the remote servers are, remote Git repositories are, you could say git remote -v, and that shows you the origin right here for both fetch and push. So that's my remote. So I'm going to clear the screen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down this pull request. Now to do that, I'll come back over here, go to pull request. Notice that it is pull request number 5. Okay, so you open this up, you'll see that it's number 5. So what I can do is, let's bring these back up. I'm going to say git fetch. This is origin. That's my remote repository. Pull / the number, which is 5, head. So what that does is going to go out to origin, which is GitHub. It's going to pull down the number 5 pull request at the head, meaning the last version, the last commit. And we're going to pull this into, we're going to put colon, we're going to pull this into a new branch. I'll call it PR5 for pull request 5. Okay, so I hit enter, that pulled down all the changes. Now, if we clear the screen here, we can see that git branch, we see we have 2 branches. We now have main and PR5. Notice down in the lower right-hand corner down here, we still see program.cs and vszipper.csproj. If I do git checkout PR5, notice down here we now have appsetting.json has showed up. Okay, that just indicates that the changes that are in this pull request have now been shown on disk. Okay, so we can work on this version of the project. Now, what I would do, the first thing I would do, I've already reviewed this pull request, but we're going to do it kind of at a quick level. The first thing I would do is I would read through the changes. Okay, so you'd see 1 commit. And if you look at files changed over here, you can see here's all the changes that happened. So for instance, he added Microsoft extensions.configuration, and then he brought in the configuration, created a configuration object, and is just reading from app settings.json, not app settings.development.json, not secrets.json or anything else, just app settings.json. He's doing a build and then bringing in that configuration for the zipper project. There are some new NuGet packages that have been added, and also the app settings.json file is being copied to the output directory, and we're preserving the newest. So those are the things that changed in the CS proj file. And then in the app settings.json file, which is fully new, he added an exclusions section, which is an array of the 6 different exclusions I have so far. Now, I already had exclusions, but I had them in the C# code itself. This moves them out to the app settings.json file. And then in the zipper file, instead of adding those exclusions manually, we go to the configuration and we get that section called exclusions. We get the array of strings for the exclusions path, excluded paths and extensions. We loop through each of them and add that to our exclusions list instead of doing it manually. Okay, and then he does have a little bit here. His system reformatted, so it added a space before and after my for each instead of parentheses, where mine did not. So that is something to watch out for, because notice we have this line right here, line 40, line 42, and line 48 have all been changed, but the only change is the way I do my formatting versus the way his system does the formatting. So be careful of that. That's not ideal to have that, but again, not a big deal in this case. I'll just put it back, but it's something to keep an eye on so that you don't do it. Now, I could, if I wanted to, when I review this changes, I could request changes and have him take these lines out. I can even put the plus here and say, hey, I want you to take out this formatting. I'm not going to do that, but we could do that. And then finally, we have 2 files added to the library project for the configuration. Okay, so that's what's going on with the pull request. That's the first thing I would do, is review the files changed. But just looking at the files changed, you don't always notice everything. It's good to do what we just did, which is bring those files down. And then you can open this up in Visual Studio. So you can open this up. I would run it, which I've already done. We're not going to do that today, but run it, make sure it works, make sure that the build still works, make sure that the code still does what it's supposed to do, and I don't see any weird bugs or other things that have been introduced. Once I'm happy, the other thing I would do is come back over here and I would do a git merge main. What this does, I'm on the PR5 branch. It's going to bring in the latest changes from main, just to make sure there's no conflicts since the last time that the pull request was created. So I do that, it's already up to date, which means that the pull request is just going to continue the path of my branch or of my main. It's not going to cause a conflict with what changes I might have in main. So we're all good there, which means that in my opinion, this pull request is ready to approve. Okay, so I'd come back over here. I would come back to the pull request if not already in it. So I open that back up. Cool, we're here. I get a choice right here. I don't have continuous integration yet. I need to do that. That's on my list of things to do. But this branch has no conflicts with the base branch. That's already checked to make sure that we can merge automatically if we want. So I can merge the pull request by creating a merge commit, a squash and merge, and a rebase and merge. Now, I'm not going to go through everything about what these 3 are, but essentially, and this is not going to change much in this case because of the fact that there's only one commit. So with one commit, it's a whole lot easier. So Pierre only did one commit to make these changes. But if there was, let's say, 5, 10, 15 commits, maybe you want to include all that history in your main branch. So you create a merge commit. And what that does is it brings in those changes. Let me just kind of draw us out a little bit. So you have your main line here, okay? And yes, this is a horrible drawing, that's okay. And so what Pierre did is said, okay, I'm going to do some work. And so he did some work over here, and he just did one, but let's just say he did a few, like this, okay? And now we're gonna do a pull request. And I say, yep, we're gonna do that. And if I do a merge pull request, it will create a merge commit right here, like so. And you'll see this from now on in my history, you'll see this kind of side quest work that Pierre did in all the steps along the way. And then this new merge request is the new commit that goes on the main that brings everything in. So that's the first way of doing things. Now, let's look again at what the next thing is. The next thing is a squash and merge. So these are the two we want to talk about mostly, and I'll diagram a squash and merge just to show you. So you have your progress here, and at some point, Pierre does a branch, and let's just say he does 2 commits. Now, a squash and merge, what it's going to do is it's going to take these two, and instead of creating a merge commit, it's going to create a new commit that brings in these, okay? And it's on the line. So this kind of goes away. And these, the work and the commit messages go into this new commit. That's a squash and merge. So now the history just looks like we went 1, 2, 3, 4, all right? And there is no this stuff anymore. It's been squashed, okay? It cleans up the history, makes it a little more understandable, okay? And then a rebase, it's a little messy, but essentially what it does is it goes like this. And so you 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is 5, 6, okay? It kind of moves things around. Probably not the way to go unless you're understanding what happens behind the scenes. So I would avoid the rebase, okay? So for us, what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna do create a merge commit. So I'll leave his information on the history. Normally in my larger projects, especially when I'm doing it myself, I will do a squash and merge. But in this case, we're gonna create a merge commit, and I will say, go ahead and merge that. And then here I have my commit message and description. So merge pull request number 5 from, and it shows where it's coming from. And there's his message, which by the way, we should change the spelling on, that just says, hey, here's what's been changed. So I leave this like so. I'm going to say confirm this, and now this brought this into my history. Now it's merged. Okay, so we do a pull request. We'll see one close. There it's merged. So this is how you work with your project. Okay, you bring things in through pull request. If you're not familiar with pull request, we give you a quick tutorial. We're going to do more content on GitHub and Git in the future really quickly, but we'll have some courses and content. But in the meantime, pull request can be a confusing term. So let's just talk real quick about what a pull request is. So I have over here my repository. Okay, this is the zipper project. Okay, that's mine. Only I have access to write to it, which means you could not have done that merge into this project because only I have access to it. Now I can grant access to more people, but in general, you don't have access to an open source project. So if you want to do work on it like Pierre did, then what you do is you make a copy of the repository. So now this is a copy of the repository. So right now mine says Tim Corey /vzipper. It would be, your name /vzipper. That's a copy, which is what you can see over here with forks. Now, this copy here, you pull it down locally, and that's probably going to be, the main branch. And you say, okay, I'm going to create a new branch, and let's just call this, whatever, the pull request branch, but it's local right now. You do the changes in it. You push it back up to GitHub, and now in your repository, there is the pull request branch. That's the branch of changes that you've made in your version of my repository. And then you say, hey, Tim, I want to create a pull request. And that's basically a request over here in my repository. And you say, I want you to come grab this branch off of my repository. So I'm going to look at your pull request and say, oh, there's your branch. That's what Pierre did. So this is Pierre's branch, let's say. And I'll look at Pierre's copy of the code and what has changed compared to my branch, my main. I'm going to say, okay, here's the changes. I'll look at it and say, yep, I like those. I want to bring those into my repository. So I am going to pull from your copy into my repository. So the request is for me as the owner. So you come to me, Pierre comes to me and says, I request that you pull my information into your code. I look at it, I pull it into my repository because only I have rights to write to my repository. Therefore, now Pierre's code is in my repository, even though Pierre does not have rights to write to my code. Yes, rights and right. So Pierre doesn't have access to make changes to my code. But because he requested that I pull a read-only copy from his repository, I did that, looked at it, and goes, cool, that's what I want. So therefore, I could then, again, copy that read-only version of the code back over to my repository and merge it in. So that's how a pull request works. That's why it works. That's why in open source, very few people have rights to make modifications to a repository, and yet pretty much anybody can contribute to a repository. Pierre just contributed to this repository, even though he didn't have the ability to change any code. So that's how it works. That's what makes open source work so well, and that's how you perform the task on both sides. So whether you're Pierre and making a new pull request, or whether you are me and reviewing that pull request and merging it in or making changes or requesting changes, I can't change Pierre's code. So therefore I have to request Pierre make changes. Or I can say, no, you know what? That's not for me. I don't want that. Sorry, and close it down. So whatever it is, that's how you bring in or not code into your open source project. All right. So hopefully these tips have helped. Hopefully they help you navigate through the somewhat confusing space of open source development. If you're an open source development maintainer, meaning you're the person that owns a project, remember, maintain those boundaries. Make sure that you don't let this consume your life or hurt you as an individual. From the contributor side, make sure you're respectful. Make sure that you realize that you are not in control and that your ideas might not align with the owner's ideas. Do your best to contribute in a positive way. Your contributions can be what gets you known, what might get you a new job, might get you, noticed in the community because of how you do work. But make sure that what you do is positive. All right. So open source can be great. Just make sure that you follow those tips and hopefully you'll have a great time. Make sure you put stuff like this on your portfolio or resume, show off what you can do, because employers do look at your code. And if they see good code and they see code done well with clear, realized goals, that's a very big positive in your favor. Okay? Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I appreciate it. And as always, I am Tim Corey.